Beneath the red skies of Zerion Station, where 3 moons made silver shadows across glass-like towers, a human father sat alone eating his lunch. The air buzzed with the faraway sound of machines that controlled gravity, while alien sellers called out about their goods in languages that sounded like twisted starlight. In the dark corner of the big marketplace, a small dragon girl pressed her face against the energy wall that separated the food court from the lower levels. Her scaly cheeks were wet with tears. She tried to hide. None of the proud Zerion rich people noticed how hungry she was, how alone she was, or how desperate she felt. None of them except one. And what he did next would not only change 2 lives forever, it would get the attention of the most powerful being in 7 star systems. Before we start, subscribe now so you don't miss more amazing stories like this one. Oh, and before we dive in, tell us in the comments where you are watching this video from. We love hearing from you and always read every message. The Zerion Station marketplace stretched like a huge shopping church beneath its dome of living glass where glowing patterns pulsed along with the station's heartbeat. Sellers from 100 worlds showed their goods on floating platforms that drifted between the tall support pillars. Each one was carved from a single piece of living crystal that sang softly in beautiful sounds. Marcus Chen sat on a bench made of shiny space rock. His worn work clothes marked him as clearly as a sign among the silk-wearing rich people of Zerion. The other customers gave him lots of space, their conversations dropping to whispers when they passed, their jeweled eyes showing nothing but hate for the human repair worker who dared to eat his simple sandwich in their special place. Look at it. Trying to fit in, sneered a Zerion rich man whose see-through wings shimmered with inherited wealth. His friends laughed like wind chimes in a storm, their laughter sharp and cutting. Someone should tell the creature that this area is for civilized beings, added another, her voice dripping with the kind of casual meanness that came from many generations of being better than everyone else. Marcus kept his eyes on his meal, a simple protein sandwich that would have to last him until his next work shift ended. He'd learned long ago that talking back only made things worse. On a Zerion station, humans were allowed only for their work, nothing more. They were the hands that fixed the machines, the backs that carried heavy things, the voices that were meant to stay forever silent. But while the hall laughed, something moved in the shadows between the market stands, small, bent over, and watching with eyes that held the wisdom of ancient stars. The dragon girl couldn't have been more than 8 years old. Her scales were a deep emerald green that caught the fake starlight filtering through the dome. She pressed herself against the energy wall that separated the main market from the service tunnels, her small hands leaving foggy handprints on the buzzing field. Her stomach growled loudly, a sound that somehow carried across the huge space despite all the background noise. Veltar noticed her first, his hunting gaze sharpening with opportunity. He rose from his floating chair, his wings spreading in a show of power that cast rainbow shadows across the shiny floor. Well, he announced to his gathered fans, his voice carrying the dramatic tone of someone born to get attention. It seems we have another unwanted visitor today, a little beast who thinks she belongs among her betters. The crowd turned as one, drawn by the promise of entertainment. The dragon girl shrank back, but the wall prevented her escape into the tunnels. Her eyes looked around frantically, looking for any way away from the gathering attention. Any shadow deep enough to hide her shame. Perhaps our human friend would like to share his feast with the creature, Veltar continued, pointing dramatically toward Marcus. After all, don't simple creatures stick together? The laughter that followed was like breaking glass, sharp and jagged. Marcus felt every eye in the marketplace focus on him, waiting for his response, hungry for his embarrassment. He could feel the weight of what they expected, the certainty that he would either back down or fight back. Either response would satisfy their need to feel superior. No one believed. He would even try to help, but the silence that followed his next movement spread across the room like a storm gathering. Strength, Marcus stood slowly, his movement careful and unhurried despite the pressure of 100 watching eyes. He walked toward the energy wall where the dragon girl cowered, her small body shaking like a leaf in space wind. The crowd's laughter died to whispers, then to nothing at all as they watched something they hadn't expected. Not fighting back, not anger, but simple compassion. The wall hummed as he got close, its energy field designed to keep the unwanted people separated from their betters. But Marcus had been working the repair shifts for 3 years. He knew the station systems better than the rich people, who simply assumed they would always work. He placed his hand on the control panel hidden behind a decorative crystal shape. With a soft beep, a small service door opened in the wall, just large enough for him to step through. "What are you doing, human?" Veltar demanded, his voice rising with anger. "That section is off limits to paying customers." Marcus ignored him, kneeling down to the dragon girl's eye level. Up close, he could see the intelligence in her golden eyes, the careful way she held herself, despite her obvious hunger and fear. This wasn't just a child. There was something ancient in her look, something that spoke of family lines older than the station itself. "Hey there," he said softly, his voice gentle in a way that seemed to surprise everyone present, including the girl herself. "You look hungry. Would you like to share my sandwich?" The dragon girl stared at him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face for any sign of teasing or meanness. When she found none, tears began to flow freely down her scaly cheeks. I haven't eaten in 2 days," she whispered in accented space language, her voice carrying the musical sounds of her species. And just when everyone thought they understood what they were seeing, something was revealed that no one expected. As Marcus broke his sandwich in half and offered the larger piece to the girl, she looked up at him with wonder that seemed to light the air around them. But it wasn't just thankfulness that made the watching crowd fall silent. It was recognition dawning in the dragon girl's eyes, a spark of something that went beyond simple kindness. "You're him," she breathed, her voice barely able to be heard but somehow carrying to every corner of the marketplace. "You're the one from the stories, the keeper of the old ways." The words hit the crowd like a physical force. Ancient dragon language wasn't taught in schools anymore, wasn't spoken in polite society. But every being in that marketplace had heard the old tales, the legends whispered in nurseries across the galaxy. The keeper of the old ways, the mythical figure who would one day bring balance to the universe through a single act of perfect compassion. Veltar's laughter came out forced and brittle. "Don't be ridiculous, child. He's just a repair worker, a nobody." But the dragon girl shook her head, her golden eyes never leaving Marcus's face. "No," she said with quiet certainty. "I can feel it. The old blood recognizes the old soul." Marcus felt something shift in the atmosphere of the station itself. The crystal pillars began to sing in harmonies they hadn't produced for centuries. The living glass of the dome pulsed with patterns that seemed to respond to some deep basic change in the space order. "This is impossible," Veltar snarled, but his voice carried the first note of uncertainty. The keeper is a fairy tale. It wasn't just knowledge, it was legacy, and suddenly, silence fell across the crowd like a blanket of stars. High above the marketplace, invisible to all below, a figure appeared on the observation deck reserved for the station's most important visitors. She moved like liquid shadow given form, her presence bending light itself around her massive body. Queen Lyrily of the Drachmoth Empire was tall and royal beyond human understanding. Her scales were the deep purple-black of space between galaxies, each one marked with tiny writings that told the story of her 1,000-year rule. Her presence gave off a power that made the air itself seem to bow in respect, molecules rearranging themselves in honor to her royal aura. She had come to Zerion Station in secret, traveling through space-folding tunnels that existed outside normal reality, drawn by reports of her daughter's disappearance from the diplomatic quarters. The station security forces had assured her that Princess Zara was simply exploring, that children of her age often wandered beyond their assigned areas looking for adventure. They had promised a quick and quiet solution. The Queen had expected to find Zara among the cultural displays, perhaps questioning some minor official about trade routes or space history, with the never-ending curiosity that marked all children of the royal bloodline. She had not expected to find her daughter hungry and alone in the service tunnels, forgotten by the very beings who claimed eternal friendship with her empire, who had sworn sacred promises to protect any member of the Drachmoth royal family with their lives. But what captured the Queen's attention wasn't the carelessness of the Zerion rich people. She had dealt with their failure before, and would deal with it again in ways that would make their glass towers weep with regret. What truly shocked her was the human who had stepped across species barriers, social rules, and personal safety to offer comfort to her daughter. As she watched Marcus share his small meal with Zara, something stirred in the Queen's ancient heart, something that had been sleeping for 1,000 years of conquering and dealing with other rulers. She had lived through the rise and fall of civilizations, had talked peace deals with species that communicated through controlled exploding stars, had fought wars against forces that existed in 17 dimensions at once. In all that time, in all those ages of contact with beings beyond counting, she had rarely seen an act of pure selflessness, kindness offered without expecting anything in return, without knowledge of what would happen, without hope of being noticed. Her enhanced senses, developed over thousands of years of survival in the dangerous depths of space, allowed her to sense the emotional connections flowing between Marcus and her daughter. She could taste the real concern in his mental signals, could feel the fatherly instincts that drove him to protect a child who was not his own, from a species he barely understood, despite social rules that could destroy his job. Below them, Marcus seemed unaware of the cosmic forces his simple act had set in motion. He sat cross-legged on the cold deck floor, his posture unconsciously copying the sitting poses of the ancient earth monks, listening with complete attention as Zara told him about her world, her people, her crushing loneliness as the only dragon child on a station full of beings who saw her as a curiosity at best, a threat at worst. "My mama says that kindness is the rarest element in the universe," Zara said between bites of the sandwich, her voice growing stronger with each word as food and compassion brought back her natural strength. "She says it's worth more than all the quantum crystals in the galaxy, more precious than time itself." "Your mama sounds very wise," Marcus replied, and something in his tone, the unconscious respect he showed for parental authority, the gentle way he spoke of a mother he had never met, made the Queen's breath catch in her throat like captured starlight. In that moment, she understood why her daughter had wandered so far from safety. The child was searching for something the diplomatic quarters could never provide: genuine human connection, the simple pleasure of being seen as a person rather than a political symbol. And she had found it in the most unlikely place, offered by the most unlikely person. Veltar, meanwhile, had gathered his courage and his followers, his fear transforming into the kind of desperate anger that came from watching one's worldview crumble in real time. "Enough of this nonsense," he declared, his voice echoing off the crystal pillars with forced bravery. "Security, remove these trespassers from civilized space. This contamination has gone far enough." The station's automated guards began to move toward Marcus and Zara, their sleek forms moving with machine-like precision through the crowd, energy weapons charged with deadly light, targeting systems locked onto the human whose only crime had been caring about a hungry child. The crowd pressed closer, eager to see the human put in his place, to watch him learn the consequences of stepping above his assigned place in their carefully ordered universe. Some part of Queen Lyrily wanted to let the scene play out, to see how far Marcus's courage would carry him when faced with impossible odds. But her daughter was down there, and that changed everything. The motherly instincts that had been shaped by centuries of rule flared to life with the heat of newborn stars. But the final blow came not from weapons or words. It came from a name the galaxy had long forgotten. Queen Lyrily's voice cut through the marketplace like a sword of singing crystal, each word carrying the weight of star authority and the fury of a protective mother whose child had been threatened. The sound itself was impossible, a voice that somehow vibrated in multiple dimensions at the same time, creating sounds that bypassed the ears entirely and spoke directly to the consciousness of every being present. "Veltar of House Zirion, step forward." The temperature in the marketplace seemed to drop by degrees as every being present felt the presence descend among them like a living storm. Frost began to form on the crystal surfaces despite the station's environmental controls, and the very air took on a quality that made breathing feel like drinking starlight. The Queen appeared at the center of the space, her form radiating power that made the station's energy systems flicker and dim in cascading waves of electromagnetic interference. She was magnificent and terrible at the same time, her massive body towering above even the tallest beings present. Her scales were not merely purple-black. They were the color of space itself, each one containing depths that seemed to hold entire galaxies. When she moved, reality bent around her like liquid, space-time rippling with gravitational effects that made sensitive individuals dizzy. The security drones froze in mid-flight, their systems overloaded by being close to her royal aura. Sparks fell from their weapons as circuits designed for planetary enforcement struggled to process energy signals that belonged on the scale of star events. One by one, they simply shut down, their artificial intelligences overwhelmed by the impossibility of her presence. Veltar fell to his knees immediately, his see-through wings folding in terror as he recognized the being whose empire could turn Zirion Station to space dust with a single command. His followers collapsed around him like dominoes, their earlier arrogance evaporating like morning mist on an airless moon. The proud rich people who had been so eager to embarrass others now pressed their faces to the deck floor, their bodies shaking with the basic fear of prey animals in the presence of a top predator. Around the marketplace, sellers abandoned their stands and customers forgot their shopping, as the reality of what they were seeing entered their consciousness. This wasn't just any member of the Drakmoth royal family. This was the Queen herself, the living embodiment of an empire that spanned 17 star systems and commanded the loyalty of over 2 trillion beings. Her reputation came before her across the galaxy like the shockwave from an exploding star. She had ended the Centauri War with a single negotiation that left 3 species in her debt. She had personally led the evacuation of the Kepler colonies when their star exploded, organizing the rescue of 40 billion beings in less than 72 hours. She had talked out trade agreements that brought wealth to worlds that had known only poverty, and her justice was both fast and absolute. But she was also a mother who had spent the last 6 hours believing her daughter might be dead, or worse, disappeared into the maze-like underworld of a station whose security she had trusted absolutely. The combination of motherly fear transformed into protective rage and royal authority was terrifying to see, a force of nature that made hurricanes seem gentle by comparison. "Your Majesty," Veltar gasped, his voice barely a whisper that somehow carried in the absolute silence that had fallen over the marketplace. His earlier arrogance had been replaced by something approaching total terror, as he realized that his casual meanness had targeted the daughter of the most powerful being in known space. "We had no idea. The child didn't identify herself. We would never have—" The excuses died in his throat as the Queen's gaze settled on him with the weight of star gravity. Her eyes were ancient beyond human understanding, holding depths that spoke of civilizations risen and fallen, of decisions that had shaped the evolution of entire species. When she looked at someone, they understood instinctively that they were being judged by standards that went beyond their ability to understand. "Silence," the Queen commanded, and the word carried such authority that even the station's air processors seemed to pause in respect. The very concept of sound seemed to bend to her will, creating a zone of absolute quiet that extended far beyond the marketplace into the station's hallways and rooms. She moved toward Marcus and Zara with steps that seemed to make the deck floor sing, each footstep creating sounds that traveled through the station structure like the heartbeat of some huge organism. Her presence was so overwhelming that reality itself seemed to struggle to contain her, space warping and shifting around her massive form in ways that hurt to look at directly. The crowd parted before her like a tide in reverse, beings scrambling to clear a path for her passage. Some pressed themselves against walls or behind pillars, while others simply ran from the marketplace entirely, unable to cope with being close to such concentrated power. Those who remained did so more from being frozen than courage, stuck like prey animals, hoping that stillness might somehow make them invisible to a predator beyond their understanding. Marcus had risen to his feet, but made no move to bow or grovel. Instead, he gently placed a protective hand on Zara's shoulder, ready to defend her, even against odds that would make quantum computers weep in despair. His stance was unconsciously protective, his body positioned between the approaching Queen and her daughter, in a gesture so instinctive that it spoke to depths of character that no amount of social training could teach. The Queen stopped before them, her ancient eyes studying Marcus with an intensity that seemed to peer into his very soul, examining every thought and motivation with the precision of a cosmic scale scanner. For a moment that seemed to stretch across geological time periods. The entire universe held its breath, waiting to see what judgment would fall from the lips of the most powerful being in 7 star systems. The silence was absolute, more complete than the vacuum between galaxies. Even the normally constant background hum of the station's systems had somehow been silenced, as if the very technology that kept them alive had paused out of respect for the moment. In that silence, possibilities hung like quantum states waiting to collapse into reality. The future balanced on the edge of a single word. "You fed my daughter," she said finally, her voice softer now but no less powerful, carrying undertones that spoke of gratitude older than language itself. "She was hungry," Marcus replied simply, his voice steady despite the cosmic forces standing before him. There was no false modesty in his tone, no attempt to make his actions smaller or bigger. He spoke with the simple honesty that had driven him to share his sandwich in the first place. Any decent being would have done the same. A sound escaped the queen's lips that might have been laughter or might have been something far more complex, the sound of a mother's heart recognizing true nobility in the most unexpected place, of an empress discovering that the universe still contained surprises capable of moving her ancient soul. Any decent being. "Yes," she agreed, her voice carrying sounds that seemed to make the very air shimmer with meaning. "But as we have seen today, decency is rarer than you suppose, rarer than quantum crystals, more precious than time itself, more valuable than all the treasures of my empire." She turned to address the cowering rich people, her voice carrying to every corner of the marketplace and beyond, transmitting across the station's communication networks to reach every being aboard. The words would be recorded, stored, and studied for generations, becoming part of the historical record that defined entire time periods of space, civilization. Let it be known throughout the galaxy that Marcus Chen of Earth has shown more nobility in a single act than all of your bloodlines, combined across centuries of existence, she declared, her voice carrying the weight of royal decree and the authority to reshape laws with a word. "He shall be granted full citizenship of Zirion Station, with all privileges therein, and the protection of the Drachmoth Empire for the remainder of his days and those of his descendants unto the 7th generation." The announcement hit the marketplace like a physical force, each word carrying legal and social implications that would ripple through diplomatic channels for years to come. Marcus Chen, repair worker 3rd class, had just been raised to a status that most rich people could only dream of achieving, protected by the most powerful military force in known space, and granted rights that went beyond planetary boundaries. And as they walked away together, the Queen, her daughter, and the human who had reminded the universe what kindness truly meant, no one dared laugh again, for they finally understood what they had witnessed. Not just an act of compassion, but the moment when the galaxy remembered that true nobility had nothing to do with birth or wealth, and everything to do with the courage to care for strangers. 3 months later, the Zirion Station cultural agreements were signed in the very marketplace where a simple sandwich had changed everything. The ceremony took place at the exact spot where Marcus had knelt to offer food to a hungry child, now marked by a crystal monument that sang with harmonic frequencies whenever acts of kindness occurred near it. The new laws established the dignity rules, ensuring that all beings aboard the station, regardless of species, social standing, or money status, would be treated with basic respect. Representatives from 47 worlds attended the signing ceremony, their diverse forms creating a tapestry of space unity that would have been impossible just months before. The Andorian ambassador cried tears of liquid silver as she stamped her seal on the document, while the crystal delegate from Zirion Prime vibrated with frequencies of deep gratitude. Even the mysterious representatives from the void reaches, beings who communicated through controlled gravitational waves, participated in the historic moment. Marcus Chen was appointed as the first human cultural liaison, his repair uniform replaced with robes of honor woven from star silk that had been spun in the heart of a neutron star. The fabric itself seemed to hold starlight, shifting and shimmering with patterns that told the story of his transformation from forgotten worker to space diplomat. But more important than his new position was the friendship that had blossomed between him and young Zara, who visited the station regularly with her mother to make sure the new rules were being followed, and to share countless meals that had become legendary throughout the diplomatic community. The Dragon Girl had learned something precious that day in the marketplace. That family wasn't always about blood or species, but about the connections forged in moments of shared vulnerability and unconditional kindness. She had grown stronger in the months since their first meeting, her scales now showing the healthy emerald brightness that marked proper nutrition and emotional well-being among her people. But more than physical health, she had gained something infinitely more valuable: the knowledge that she was seen, valued and loved by beings who had chosen to care about her welfare. Marcus had discovered that sometimes the most deep changes in the universe began with the simplest gestures, that individual choices could create ripples that spread across space and time to touch lives on worlds he would never visit. His daughter Sarah had joined him on Zirion Station, her eyes wide with wonder at the marvels of space civilization, but prouder still of her father's role in creating a kinder universe. The scholarship funds established in Marcus's name had already changed the lives of thousands of young beings from poor backgrounds, ensuring that talent and curiosity would never again be wasted due to circumstances of birth. Queen Lyrily, watching her daughter laugh as she shared another meal with her human friend, felt something she hadn't experienced in centuries of rule. Hope that went beyond political planning. Hope that her empire, built on strength and maintained through power, might evolve into something greater. Something built on the radical foundation of compassion that could unite rather than divide, that could create rather than merely conquer. Her advisors had initially been skeptical of the changes Marcus's example had inspired throughout the empire. But the results spoke for themselves. Productivity increased when workers felt valued. Creativity grew when different perspectives were welcomed, and conflicts resolved themselves more easily. When empathy replaced exploitation as the default way of interacting. The story of the human who shared his sandwich with a crying Dragon Girl spread across the galaxy like ripples in the cosmic web, inspiring similar acts of kindness on worlds from the Andromeda Spiral to the Edge systems. Peace talks that had been stuck for decades suddenly found new momentum as diplomats remembered that their differences were far less important than their shared capacity for empathy. Trade arguments resolved themselves as beings chose cooperation over competition, understanding that wealth shared was wealth multiplied. Children across the galaxy went to sleep each night hearing the story of Marcus and Zara, learning that heroism didn't require superpowers or ancient weapons. Sometimes it only required the courage to care about someone who was different, someone who was suffering, someone who had been forgotten by the rest of the universe. In the end, Marcus Chen returned to his modest home that night, now considerably more fancy, but still chosen for comfort rather than show, with the same simple contentment he'd always carried. But now the universe itself had shifted slightly on its axis. The stars sang a little brighter. The space between worlds felt a little less empty. And somewhere in the vast darkness, new stories were being born from the seeds of an old truth that had been waiting patiently for someone to remember its power. In a universe built on power and division, sometimes a single act of dignity is enough to remind the stars themselves what they were truly meant to light up. Not the darkness between us, but the light that connects us all, the invisible threads of compassion that bind every conscious being in a web of shared destiny and infinite possibility.